The Wonderful World of Dark Lords. Report 27. Gracie Manor. Gracie Manor has a reputation as a haunted mansion, and it certainly looks the part. Located in the heart of a dismal bayou and shrouded in a perpetual gloomy mist, the manor combines the dreariest elements of Mordant, Saranya, and Barovia in a single package. I expected to find it unoccupied when I entered, as records show that no one has owned Gracie Manor in nearly a decade. To my surprise, however, I found a pair of squatters in the library. Two opera singers named Antonio and Harriet, who had set forth from Cardicus to seek their fortune before audiences with fewer options and deeper pockets. They had come in for shelter from the rain a week ago, and had not left the manor since. At first I was puzzled about their continued presence, for the dilapidated manor was hardly welcoming even before any ghosts had made themselves known. The borders were clearly open or I would have been barred entry. Why then were these squatters still here? It was not long before I learned how and why the mansion ensnares its victims. It seems that while 997 spirits already haunted the halls of Gracie Manor when I arrived, they are always eager to welcome one more.
Welcome, foolish mortals, to Wonderful World of Dark Lords. I'm Tom.
I'm Rachel.
And we're discussing how to convert Disney movies to Ravenloft Domains of Dread, because when we said Disney and spooky, it was inevitable we'd end up here.
Along the way, we'll look at the Dark Lord, the domain itself, and some plot hooks and adaptation ideas to integrate the setting into your own campaign.
Today's episode, The Haunted Mansion.
So, before we get started into the main...
Before we get into the wacky ghost antics.
Yes. We do, much like Encanto and Hunchback of Notre Dame, we have a content advisory just for the general premise of the episode, because there is a long-standing tradition within all versions of the Haunted Mansion, going right back to the ride with My Way Out.
Yeah, there's always My Way Out.
Of people willingly choosing to become ghosts if you take our meaning. And in this particular case, it's especially true because we're mostly going to be looking at the 2023 movie, in which that's a huge plot point, that you have to choose to become a ghost. So we are going to be talking about choosing to end your mortal existence and become a ghost. That might be triggering for you, or it might just be, this is the last time that we're going to be very careful to avoid talking about fungicide and insecticide, and you take our meaning.
Things.
So if you don't want to explain what the words fungicide and insecticide mean to your big-eared little pitchers, maybe listen to this when they aren't in the room.
Yeah. Just general content warning for the whole thing in that regards. Now back to the wacky ghost adventures. In the true spirit of the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, right.
Like we get My Way Out, and then we get Hot and Cold Running Chills. Whatever the heck that is.
So, today's episode, as we mentioned, is the Haunted Mansion. And this is weird. I have to explain what the Haunted Mansion means. Because there's a lot of different things that could be. I didn't have to do that with the Lion King. But the Haunted Mansion, I have wanted to do something with the Haunted Mansion since we came up with the idea of the podcast. Because the Haunted Mansion is one of the core Disney horror spooky franchises. Anytime Disney does any Halloween anything, you've got a couple of these core franchises they draw on. There's Nightmare Before Christmas, there's Hocus Pocus, there's sort of general Disney villains, some of the spookier ones like Maleficent or Dr. Facilier. There's Haunted Mansion. And we have done a lot of those core Disney horror things already. I think after this, the main one we haven't done is Hocus Pocus.
Yeah, which, as we mentioned in our Pirates episode, that's going to probably be our last October episode. So we're going to have to figure out how to fill the space.
I got some ideas.
I love you. I know.
I love weird Disney spooky stuff.
I love you so much.
With Tower of Terror starring Steve Guttenberg. A haunted elevator. How are we going to get a haunted elevator into Ravenloft? I'll make it work.
I'm game.
So the Haunted Mansion, first off, just the core, this is one of the core Disney spooky things. This is one of the Disney horror channels, branches. And also, it's a haunted house. And haunted houses are great. And I love haunted houses. And I love haunted houses in Ravenloft. And I love haunted houses in Dungeons & Dragons. They make amazing dungeons. They work really well. I love haunted house movies. And so I'm like, I have to make this work. This is going to be a great D&D setting. There's so much of the Haunted Mansion ride to draw on. That could be a fantastic Dungeons & Dragons spooky dungeon crawl. But the problem is there's no story.
Yeah, like, there is, I know the Phantom Manor in Disneyland Paris has a story, but it's also very different from the traditional Haunted Mansion.
Yes.
It's, like, Western themed. And then, doesn't Tokyo Disney have a
Tokyo
story?
Disney, Tokyo Disney has a story too, but that is also very, very different.
Yeah, so if you want to have, like, you know, your Madame Leota and your Hatbox Ghost,
right.
and then it's not, you're not going to be able to get those as much.
I want to do the Haunted Mansion that you go to Hot Topic and buy stuff for. And Phantom Manor looks super cool.
And we're going to talk about it in the AU section?
You didn't click on this for Phantom Manor. You clicked on this for Madame Leota. You clicked on this for the Hitchhiking Ghosts and Welcome Foolish Mortals and all
Constant Hatchaway.
And Constant Hatchaway, yeah. But there isn't a story. And for me, this is the heart of a good ghost story. The heart of a good haunted house story is that it is a story. And so there actually is someone did a Haunted Mansion inspired, like, pure fighting dungeon crawl, which we're going to link to in the show notes as an adventure. And yeah, that absolutely works.
Yes.
If you just want to do straight Disneyland, the Haunted Mansion, as just a kind of a dungeon crawl, and you're just trying to get treasure and fight ghosts. But we want to do a story, especially the Haunted Mansion, Disneyland, or Disney World doesn't have a, like, boss ghost.
Yes.
Doesn't have an obvious capital V villain. Doesn't have an obvious candidate for Dark Lord. And you could say some ghosts are more important or more sinister than the other, but we never get enough about any of them to say this is going to be our Dark Lord. Then, lucky us, 2023, the Haunted Mansion movie came out.
Yes.
The second try. Haunted Mansion Movie 2. Not Haunted Mansion Movie 2, but the second Haunted Mansion movie.
Yeah. We did watch the 2003 Haunted Mansion movie. That's another one we're going to be talking about in the AU section. Did not particularly care for that one.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
It had moments.
It is, yeah.
I would much rather rewatch that than rewatch Wish. But 2023 Haunted Mansion we really enjoyed.
We saw the trailers and we were like, oh, please be good. This is going to be so perfect for our podcast if this is good.
Yeah. And then, once again, it's a great family Halloween movie that Disney released in July.
Why do you keep doing this?
Get out of your own way.
No, if you haven't seen it yet, 2023 Haunted Mansion movie, really good.
Really, yes.
Really good. Sorry, there's going to be spoilers. So yeah, heads up. Pause this. Go watch that. It's on Disney Plus. It's really good, and we are going to spoil the heck out of it. We have to dig into, like, all the backstory that gets revealed as the movie goes on.
Yeah.
And my hope, little sidebar, I mentioned this before to Rachel, my hope is that this is a Hocus Pocus situation where it becomes like an every year Halloween viewing, Disney Plus viewing, Disney Channel Halloween Fest viewing, and then in 20 years they're doing, like, hiring some shamefaced Hyperion author to write Haunted Mansion, the novelization, and the all-new sequel, and bringing everybody back for a lower-budget Disney Plus sequel, or that has that kind of perpetual fandom, that it finds its audience and becomes a kind of, like, icon of Halloween, the way that happened with Hocus Pocus.
Yeah, because this was a really good movie. I liked it a lot.
So, the number one thing, as we said, that this movie gives us that we needed to do specifically making this a Ravenloft domain, and in my opinion, making it a kind of satisfying haunted house, is you needed a villain, you needed a Dark Lord, and we'll talk about the villain, the Dark Lord of the 2023 Haunted Mansion movie, which is of our domain. Last chance to not have spoilers. In a section we like to call
The Lord. The Lord. With so many ghosts haunting Gracie Manor, the prospect of finding the Lord at its heart was daunting. The specter of William Gracie himself seemed like an obvious place to start. In my efforts to communicate with the spirits, however, I learned that while Gracie had certainly dabbled in necromancy, he was more of a victim than a villain. After the death of his beloved wife, Gracie had conducted seance after fruitless seance in an attempt to contact her, ultimately taking his own life in the hopes of joining her on the other side. Most of the ghosts he had summoned remained in the manor, beginning its transformation into the hotbed of supernatural activity it is today. The medium who summoned these haunts, Madame Leota, seemed like another potential culprit, and it was through her journal that I uncovered the truth. Apparently, one of her seances had drawn a malevolent spirit named Alistair Crump, whose grief at the death of his mother had led him to the occult. With his taste for dark magic and his hunger to punish all who had slighted him or his mother, he became an infernalist, debauching others in life and continuing to corrupt them after death. Crump manipulated Gracie into taking his own life, and today he continues to lure inhabitants of the mansion toward their deaths. Since he has a measure of control over every ghost who haunts it, each death increases his power, and he believes that gaining control over 1,000 haunts will free him from the house that is both his kingdom and his prison. Thanks to the machinations of Crump and his thralls, those who enter the mansion with sparks of wrath in their hearts find it fanned to murderous flames, while those who enter with grief come to believe that death is their only release. Those poor souls are the most pitiable of all, for there is no release at the end, only a far greater torment than what they faced in life. Although the two opera singers may have had quarrelsome natures outside of the manor, I have no doubt that Crump had been working on them before my arrival, for the slightest provocation was enough to ignite an inferno fueled by perceived slights and thefts of the spotlight. One particularly vicious altercation involved Antonio's supposed theft of Harriet's supply of Michelbrau, a Cardigan wine that sweetens the voice. I later found the broken Michelbrau bottles in the conservatory, a room that none of us had visited that day. Something in the house wanted Harriet to believe that Antonio had stolen from her in order to stoke the fires of their rivalry to deadly heights.
So our Dark Lord, and it just works so well for our purposes, it really was the missing piece, is that Hatbox Ghost that we have, told you there'd be spoilers, Hatbox Ghost we have in the 2023 movie, the backstory they give him, Alistair Crump. And just as a boss ghost, he can fill the role of Dark Lord, but they even give him a kind of backstory and motivation that work very well as a Dark Lord. But if you are listening to this, you know who the Hatbox Ghost is. If you watch the movie, as I said to do, you know who Alistair Crump is. But you might not know who the Dark Lord is, because maybe you just love Haunted Mansion. I know you're out there. I know we have at least one. At least one. You're just here for Haunted Mansion.
We've got at least one, like, Disney ride person. Yeah.
Oh boy, a podcast about the Haunted Mansion. I can't get enough of those. You might not know what a Dark Lord is, so, Rachel, what is a Dark Lord?
Well, a Dark Lord is an evil being who commits some kind of act of ultimate darkness that causes the dark powers to say, why, hello, new friend, we want to play with you forever. And so they pluck them up, and they place them in a special domain that is tailor-made just for them. There are some really great Dark Lords. There are some Dark Lords that are cool in theory, but why did you think that they were Dark Lords? This is just a haunted house. So we're going to talk about the things that separate the Strahd von Zaroviches from the OG House of Laments, which we believe there are 4 qualities that separate those Strahds from this OG House of Laments. So the first thing is that act of ultimate darkness. There's a specific evil thing that they do. They're not just a haunted house that sits around being spooky and haunted until one day it wakes up and becomes an uber haunted house.
Very cool.
Yes.
Horror book. Very cool horror story. Not a Ravenloft domain.
No, the OG House of Lament was Hill House.
Yeah.
And it did not do a specific evil act that drew the attention of the Dark Powers, which, in Strahd's case, was killing his brother because he wanted to get with his brother's fiancée. Our second element is what they call in Veneration's Guide to Ravenloft, the Torment, because we're a Disney podcast, we call it They Got What They Wanted, They Lost What They Had. And in Strahd's case, it's congratulations, you know, you killed your brother, so your brother's out of the way, you have eternal youth, so you're not too old for Titania, but you're too Strahd for Titania, and you always will be. Our third element is an element of tragedy or relatability. They're not just an evil house. There's something about them that makes us wince in sympathy. And in Strahd's case, it's that unrequited love really sucks. And then our fourth element is that the domain reflects the Dark Lord and their curse in some way. Strahd is the Dark Lord of spooky Gothic Transylvania. He is not the Dark Lord of Hill House. And his domain is a boring mud slump full of boring people because it reflects that curse of loneliness that even if he did find somebody to replace Titania, you know what? He's not going to, never mind, because everyone there is boring.
Yeah, this is the thing. Hill House, amazing. Maybe if you said the best horror novel, best ghost story of all time, you're not crazy.
No.
It's amazing. It's extraordinary. You could do really cool stuff with Hill House, but a Ravenloft domain is a specific Gothic thing.
Yes.
And the Haunted Mansion, similarly, just as the ride, really cool, but it lacks those critical elements of a Ravenloft domain.
Yeah, it's like we're going to talk about this later when we get into Aging Up and some other haunted house stories you can use for inspiration. But it's like the difference between Hill House and The Overlook and Hell House by Richard Matheson. That Hill House and The Overlook, they're just kind of bad places. They don't have a single Dark Lord boss ghost that all of that evil energy congregates around. Whereas Hell House and the 2023 version, version of Haunted Mansion, do.
Yes. So first we have our villain, our main boss evil ghost that everything radiates out from that we haven't added in the movie, and that is Alistair Crump. And it says he has this horrible rich industrialist father. He gets kicked out because he cried at his mother's funeral. And he shows up later like wealthy and powerful and inherits the fortune. And he's just like this infernalist. Like you get that he's kind of gotten into black magic. He's gotten into the occult. And that he's become this terrible person. He starts holding these huge balls and banquets for high society, but he's actually killing a lot of them. He wants to punish sort of the people that rejected him. And then he abuses his servants, and eventually they rise up and kill him, and he becomes a ghost.
And all of this is very bad, but it was kind of having me go, well, this is kind of the Dark Lord by attrition.
Yeah.
There's not one specific act of Ultimate Darkness here, but then Tom pointed out that later we do get an act of Ultimate Darkness.
So we have William Gracie, and he is the sort of owner of the Haunted Mansion in this story, in the movie. And he loses his wife, Eleanor. He loves her very much. He's desperate to get in contact with her. And so he has Madame Leota, this famous medium, move in. And they say every night for a year at midnight they would hold a seance. And the seance, and I love this so much.
Yeah. Oh,
it's
great.
so like great ghost story logic of they kind of punch a hole into the spirit world.
Yeah.
Like having a seance every night at midnight for a whole year makes this like a permanent, like, thin place in the world between the living and the dead, a place where the two worlds overlap.
Grognard. It had 5 ranks of ethereal resonance. More on that later.
We are adding in a detail that he also, which I think makes sense, that he collected all these books on the occult, all these books on divination, on ghosts, on the afterlife, as well as a lot of, like, haunted and occult objects.
Maybe he even bought some from Alistair Crump's collection,
love it.
and that's kind of what drew his attention.
That makes perfect sense. And that even, you know, he got all this stuff in his seance room to try to, once again, make the walls thinner so he could hopefully reach out and contact his wife. So all these ghosts start coming into this house. Not just like the traditional people that died there, but now this is this like borderland place between the living and the dead. They're doing seances every night. All sorts of ghosts are getting pulled in, and one of them is the ghost of Crump. And he's not just a regular ghost, because he had all this infernalist, occultist knowledge, he's like a super powerful ghost, which I love. All of this makes ghost story sense.
Perfect ghost
like,
story
logic. Of course, the evil wizard is an uber ghost.
He has PC levels.
So, Crump slips through, and he's kind of trapped in a house, and he wants to do this kind of ritual that'll somehow let him go free, maybe bring him back to the mortal world, something. And so he manipulates Gracie into killing himself. He poses his wife, Eleanor, and there's a content warning, we told you. Sorry, kids. He manipulates him, he pretends to be Eleanor, and he does this whole, like, oh, I need you to come join me on the other side. And manipulates him into killing himself, and that, bam!
Yes.
Act of Ultimate Darkness.
Because all of that stuff with killing his party guests, it's like, yeah, these were terrible people. These were, even if we're gonna say that he didn't bring the infernalism and the awfulness into his balls and parties, and these weren't, like, horrible infernalist people, they were people who had, like, laughed along when his dad cast him out and everything. Just, these were all people that he could tell himself that they deserved it.
Yeah.
But he killed Gracie in this most horrible, cruel, sadistic way.
And it is not any kind of revenge, any kind of motivation. It is just because he needs people to die to do this occult ritual. So that's our Act of Ultimate Darkness. The house is pulled into Ravenloft. And he's even touching on some of other stuff already. He's the Dark Lord. He is the boss ghost. Now he has even more power over all the ghosts of the Haunted Mansion and the mansion itself. But he's trapped it.
Yeah.
and he wants to have all those ghosts to do this ritual. So there's a curse on the house now that if you die there, you're stuck there. Like, you cannot move on.
Yeah.
Not even just your normal unfinished business stuff. Like, plenty of the ghosts in the Haunted Mansion do not have unfinished business. They just can't move on because of this curse.
Some poor person just had a stroke in the house and died totally happy, and too bad.
Yep, you're stuck. So that brings us to our torment, which I think we've kind of already set up. He got what he wanted. He lost what he had. He gets to be the boss ghost. He gets to have spiritual power. He gets to have everyone be afraid of him. He believes he can break free with this ritual. There's something about how he has this ritual where if he gets 1,000 ghosts kind of under his control, then he can break free and have some kind of, like, evil dominion. Like, you get this is going to be really bad if he breaks free to rampage around the world. But he never will. He'll never get that 1,000th ghost. And the thing I love, such a good movie.
Yeah.
The 1,000th ghost has to be willing. It has to be someone who willingly chooses to die. So the great thing is, this is not saying no one's ever going to die in the Haunted Mansion again.
Yeah.
You can still have that threat of death. You know, big living suits of armor can still axe your PCs to death. But they don't count.
Yeah.
It's not, there won't be any more ghosts or even any more people dying, but he won't get that final 1,000th ghost to complete the ritual, that keystone ghost, because he'll never succeed in having that willing victim.
Yeah, and it could even be the whole, like, maybe he has, like, 1,200 ghosts by this point, but only 999 of them count.
Yes. And then our element of tragedy and relatability. This is really on Rachel, because he's very, like, super villainy in the movie. He's very cacklingly
very
evil.
For the sake of evil, yeah. This was tricky, but I was going through and doing some research, and one of the wikis, like the Disney Villains wiki or the Haunted Mansion wiki or some wiki or another, was talking about the crying at the death of his mother, and pointing out that, like, this is actually something that relates to the theme of the movie, the overall theme of the movie, which is grief over the loss of a loved one. That, like, this is the only human thing we get for him, was that he was devastated at the loss of his mother. And so he had that same grief that Gracie felt, and, you know, and all he saw in Gracie's grief was something to manipulate, which just makes that act of darkness even more odious. And so we've got that whole, that he feels this kinship with the grieving people. We've got that Ben has the line in the movie when he's, you know, still in the depths of his despair about Alyssa,
I think.
Yeah, Alyssa's death. He says that we're all just dirt, and Crump, like, echoes that back at him. We're all just dirt. That, like, life is totally meaningless because his mother isn't there, because someone that he loved as much as his mother could die. And so we can really, like, flesh out that and touch. And again, even if it's not something that ever comes up in the game, it could be something that you have in the back of your head as like a motivation for Crump, that the only person who ever loved him died, or at least the only person he ever believed loved him died. And so he became a monster because, you know what? It's all dirt. It's all transitory. Even if I ever find someone else who loves me, she's just going to die. Why bother? Who cares? And then you even could have something, if you wanted to get even more motivation, or even kind of like an idea of what he's hoping to do when he gets out, that part of his torment and part of the element of tragedy and relatability is that his mother's ghost isn't there. Like, we had the whole thing about, in the movie, about how Eleanor's ghost isn't there. Gracie is still looking for her because she's at peace, and she died before Crump came and made it that it doesn't matter whether you're at peace or not. So there are 999 ghosts in the house, and it doesn't matter because none of them are Mom. And he is never going to see her again. He's got all these ghosts, but none of them are Mom. And you could even say that part of why he wants to escape, part of what he's hoping to do, is to do some kind of horrible necromantic ritual that's going to summon, like, tens of thousands of ghosts, and they are going to utterly wreck the mortal world, but maybe one of them will be Mom, so he doesn't care.
Yes, and this doesn't even need to be something that comes out in direct roleplay, but it can be there in the backstory. Because I love about this, a good ghost story is a mystery, and a good ghost story is discovering the story of the ghosts. It's not just a story about ghosts, it's the story of the ghosts. So for this to be a good ghost story haunted house, it needs to be this to defeat the Hatbox Ghost, we need to learn the story of the Hatbox Ghost, which is the movie's great because it does that. And then finally we have the domain reflecting the Dark Lord's personality or curse. He's a ghost. It's a haunted house. No, that you have the thing of being trapped there. That we have, the Dark Lord's always trapped there, but he's like especially trapped there because you even have all the ghosts are trapped there. And to build off what Rachel said, there's this theme of grief and this kind of like paralleling of a bunch of these characters. And this idea that the mansion, we're putting in, it's kind of implicit in the movie, but we're making explicit, that he has this deep well of grief, and so the mansion kind of calls to people with grief. It sort of calls them there, and the grief resonates. There's a bit where he talks about, Ben, as soon as you step in the door, I could taste your grief. It's so strong that the grief is sort of one of the dominant emotions of the kind of ethereal resonance of the house, and so it calls to people that have grief and then makes their grief stronger.
Oh, you're talking about the dominant emotions of ethereal resonance. Oh. It's not even my birthday.
And so that even touches that willing victim, that he deliberately is sort of trying to call out and connect and get that hook in of people with grief because he needs someone that's going to willingly choose to die. And then we have statting him out as a Dark Lord. We've mentioned that he has this connection to the sort of ethereal resonance of the house, but now we also have the other connection with the house. Base stats, real easy on this one. Ghost.
Yep.
Base stats similar to a ghost. But of course he has the other powers from all his uber ghostness. And he doesn't know he's a Dark Lord. Like he doesn't know he's trapped there for any other reason. He just thinks, I'm a ghost, this is a haunted house, I'm stuck here. Yeah. That's the ghost logic.
I need my 1,000th soul, and then I won't be stuck here anymore. Not that the dark powers will be like, no, you'll never get your 1,000th soul, and if you will, it doesn't count.
And he knows he has all these extra powers, but he assumes that's just from his occultist uber ghostness. So I really love this. In the movie, and this is great for our purposes too, because it's a great narrative thing.
It's such a good, gameable movie.
It's so gameable, oh my gosh. The powers have a dramatic arc. So it's like the haunting has a dramatic arc and his powers have a dramatic arc. That in the day, you're mostly safe. And so you can leave the house, you can do whatever, but then a dark haunting starts, and it really escalates after midnight. The stroke of 12. So when you kind of manifest the most.
Yeah.
Beyond your classic act 1 of a ghost story, the sort of whispers or the things knocked over or the cold chills or stuff. And they even say that he's most powerful at the full moon. So midnight, the night of the full moon, that's when he is fully powered. So that gives you a wonderful ticking clock for this ghost story. Those powers include enhancing negative emotions. We have with, obviously, the grief. We've mentioned that he is sort of making that rawer than it was even before with Ben or with Travis. But we can also imagine it being things like anger. So, like Constance. Maybe there's a reason she killed all 5 of her husbands. Because she was a very angry woman. And he can breathe on those embers and flare it up.
We mentioned once again, we're going to be talking more about how to basically do this as The Shining later. But if you had Constance was kind of a Jack Torrance type where that capacity for violence was always in her, but he made her go full all work and no play.
And dueling brothers. And we have one of the things is these 2 brothers who killed each other in a duel. And the whole, maybe if they hadn't been in this house, they just would have been mad at each other.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have escalated into mutual murder. And that's a pretty easy mechanical thing. It's the opposite of calm emotions. You make a charisma save to not be uncombed emotions, enraged emotions. He can read strong emotions, grief. He can give you nightmares. That's how he starts. That's one of your Act 1, not near at the full moon yet thing, and then go to full on illusions.
Yeah.
Once a classic starts as dreams and becomes full on waking hallucination illusions. He has, and we'll talk more about this later, that he can hurt other ghosts. All the ghosts are afraid of him, except for the ones that seem happy to work for him, and those are the ones that seem dark and violent, like Constance. That seem to be working for him, very willingly. But then they do turn on him, so you get the sense he's not a very good boss. But that all the ghosts, all the other ghosts, the ones that don't have anything against mortals, don't want to hurt anyone, they just want to party and dance. They're afraid of him.
Just want to come out to socialize.
And then we have, of course, the power all of them have, closing the borders. And this is a neat one, because there's obviously closing the physical borders in a traditional way. of you have this thick fog, and then undergrowth blocks the paths and the roads out. The house itself, the windows and doors, like get blocked, they disappear, locking you into the house. The hallways stretch out so you can't like move to the exit. But then we have another really cool thing this movie gives us, which is just an absolutely brilliant solution to the perennial haunted house movie plot issue. Why don't they just leave the house? So the whole point of closing the borders is, why don't you just leave Barovia?
Yes.
It sucks.
Why don't you just leave the house?
So why don't they just leave the house, Rachel?
Because of the hitchhiking ghosts.
Woo!
So, in the movie, if you haven't seen it, or if you have need a refresher, you're just fine being able to actually, like, walk out of the door. That's fine. But you get a hitchhiking ghost. And that ghost will follow you back home, and we get the sense, because there was a thing at one point when the bullies are chasing Travis, they say something about how he has to be home by dark. So you get the sense that they don't, like, pick up until after dark. You go home or wherever it is that you're going, and then the haunting starts.
Yes.
And it starts subtle, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. Like, it goes from the D&D equivalent if they're changing the channel to TV, shoving things off the table till they break or whatever, to giant waves forming and knocking you out of your house onto your butt in the street.
Or skeletal horses dragging Crips, like, through your bathroom.
Yeah. So, yes, you can leave the house, but eventually you're going to get all of these ghosts coming and just non-stop hectoring you to return. And the way that we are going to be representing that mechanically is that because they're keeping you up all night doing this, you cannot take a long rest until you go back to the house.
So you can get those levels of exhaustion.
Yeah.
And
not be regaining all of your stuff.
Yeah. And even this is a special thing. Normally, Dungeons & Dragons characters have options if a ghost is bugging them. They have magic swords and fireballs and, divine smites and a lot of options. But no, this is a special closing the borders thing. Nothing can stop that ghost.
Yeah.
Nothing can stop that ghost except going back to the house.
And maybe, like, if you divine smite it or fireball it, then it disappears, and then it comes right back.
Yep.
Because it disappears, it reforms at the house, and then it reforms next to you.
So, nope, you got no choice. You have to go back to the house. And that is cool, and that's a great answer to the question, why don't they just leave the Haunted Mansion? And it's going to be a really useful narrative thing for the movie, and a really useful narrative thing for your Haunted Mansion game.
Yeah, this is a useful thing to do rather than the straight-up, like, fog and undergrowth. If you want to be able to have them leave the house to be able to investigate and learn the story.
Yes.
Because this lets them go and do all that stuff during the day, but they have to come back at night.
In the Eddie Murphy movie, it was your more traditional, like, the whole movie basically takes place over one night.
Yeah.
And it is your more traditional, like, it's pouring rain, so the road is flooded, so they can't leave the house. And that would be your, like, if you wanted to do kind of a very one-shot equivalent. The very, like, no, this is going to be a very small, we're going to do this and go straight through. Then it would be like your classic, no, you can't leave the house. The door disappeared.
Yeah. Or even if you want to, and we'll discuss this later, in the movie they had to leave the house in order to get some of the information and stuff they needed. If you want to compress things so that everything they need is in the house, then you might not want to let them leave at all. And that would work.
Keep things focused. Kind of a one-shot. You want to do a one-shot. This is a good way to keep things focused. But if you want to be, this is a longer story, longer research, some like side missions, then you can do this. So no, you can go and do your research. You can go hit up like the town archives for information about the house and the blueprints and everything, but you can't leave.
Yeah, you can go get your sage from Costco and your ice cream from a little Baskin Robbins.
Yes, and your pen from CVS.
I love this movie. The product placement is egregious.
Movies are expensive. So, we've talked about Aleister Crumb's backstory. We've talked about his very cool and very narratively useful ghost powers. Now let's talk about his role-playing trait, ideal bond, and flaw. In the domain write-ups and Van Richten's guide, they always have these for the Dark Lords. They always have them be quotes. So we always try and do the same thing. And have quotes for our characters' role-playing trait, ideal bond, and flaw. Speaking of, I am going to be doing a write-up of this domain and putting on DM's Guild for free. Link in the show notes. Do this for all of them. If you ever want to go back and reference any of this stuff, you don't have to listen to however many hours this is going to be podcast. Okay, so I found some quotes.
Woohoo!
This one is going to be a little scattershot.
Yeah, but it'll be better than Big Hero 6.
Yeah, it will be. That was his mistake!
This ends now!
This ends now! So, this is not like... He doesn't have a ton of dialogue. Mm-hmm. And most of the stuff about his character is in the backstory we're getting.
Yeah.
But this is what I was able to find. Oh, I do love surprises. I've got a great one coming up for you. That's a potential role-playing trait, I think. Mm-hmm. I don't know about this. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me the hat. You're going to walk out of this house and never come back. And there's something there, maybe.
I really like that as, like, the being very in control.
Right.
But it's so...
Specific,
you're going to give me the hat. That's so specific.
I hate to be a terrible host and run, but I have a reunion to get to. Don't worry, you won't be alone. Let my friends show you around. Toodaloo.
Oh, I do like that.
Yeah, I like that one. I'm thinking trade for that.
Yeah, that's a good trade.
Because it's even that's how he'll interact with the PCs, and he'll
very so smug.
So smug and so like the formal. Like I do love there was that sense of gentlemanliness of when like he first meets Benny as I apologize if I'm being informal.
Yeah, this man is a blue blood.
Mm-hmm. I told you all roads lead to me.
I love that line.
Yeah, we gotta find something good for that.
If nothing else, then it'll be one of his powers in the write-up.
From the moment you step foot in this house, I could almost taste your grief. I know what you've been longing for.
Oh, that's something.
That's gotta be something. They're sorry to be so familiar. I just feel I know you already.
Oh, that's good. Oh, so many of these are so good.
They're so good for traits.
There are so many good traits here. Oh my gosh.
Okay. Now, I know this place is... I know this place is absolutely dripping with the most sorrowful souls, all searching for what eluded them in life. Searching for purpose. Too cowardly to do anything about it. But you have promise. You know that life has no meaning. We all end up in the dirt. If you're willing to help me, I can give you what you want.
Okay, you know that life has no meaning, that we all end up in the dirt. If you're willing to help me, I can give you what you want. That feels like ideal.
I could see that as ideal, yeah. I also, the next one, I think ideal, you can get what you want if you're willing.
I think that might be Bond.
Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah, so ideal, we are doing... You know that life has no meaning. We'll all end up in the dirt. If you're willing to help me, I can give you what you want. And then Bond is, you can get what you want if you're willing.
Yeah.
And, okay, flaw. We have the smugness, the cruelty. All roads lead to me. What about from the moment you stepped in the foot in the house, I can almost taste your grief. I know what you've been longing for. Like, it's a good quote. I really want to work it in. It'll be a power.
That might actually be the Bond.
Oh, yeah, and that's the Bond. That's absolutely the Bond. From the moment you stepped in, taste your grief.
Yeah, you can get what you want if you're willing. That's good, but we kind of have it with the ideal.
Yeah. Flaw. This is really tricky because, his flaw is that he's terrible, but he doesn't have a thing where he's like, I'm a terrible person.
So, what did they use to trip him up? We do that kind of sometimes also for the flaw.
It would be the arrogance, because Ben convinces him. Ben convinces him. He delays him enough by saying, you win. Mm-hmm. And Crump's sort of like, well, I know I was going to win, so...
Yeah. So, something with that.
Maybe all roads lead to me.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I told you all roads lead to me. The being, the arrogance, and the self-centeredness, and...
here's a weird thought, because it's kind of abstract, but what if the flaw is just, here's what's going to happen?
Ooh, interesting.
Because that's he thinks he knows, he thinks he's in charge,
control.
He thinks he knows, he thinks he can command everyone.
No, I love it, yeah. Here's what's going to happen. No, I love it. All right, so we have our role-playing trait, ideal, Bond, and flaw. Not the best we ever had, not the worst we ever had. See Big Hero 6.
And Snow White, my gosh.
The fairest of them all. Well, all of these are that.
Yes.
So, should we just put that 4 times?
She wants to get Snow White and be the fairest of them all. 4 quotes, boom, we're done.
There you go. And we have talked about his unique ghost power, special connection to the Haunted Mansion. And now we'll talk more about that Haunted Mansion itself in a section we'd like to call...
The Land. The Land. Thankfully, while the hauntings at Gracie Manor are numerous, they follow a predictable timetable. During the day and early evening, the house is relatively quiet unless one deliberately baits the ghosts. After midnight, the house comes to life, or unlife, with the suddenness of a summer thunderstorm. Portraits shift in their frames, suits of armor move under their own power, rooms stretch and shift positions, and phantoms reenact their last moments of life again and again. The only place that remains free of hauntings even after midnight is the library, for reasons that I was unable to ascertain. Unfortunately, this nocturnal spike in supernatural activity is not limited to the house itself, as I discovered when I left the grounds. If one attempts to leave the mansion, Crump sends a ghost to harass them until they return. It is extraordinarily difficult to rest and recover spells while being stalked by a phantom werepanther. Although some of the spirits were bent on shooting us with spectral pistols, chasing us with axes, or playing the organ at a volume that made it impossible to sleep, others seemed curiously reluctant to harm us. An animate suit of armor might stalk us, or a painted figure might move in her portrait frame, but they did not show a more sinister intention. Some even went so far as to help us. I do not believe I would have found Gracie's seance room and Madame Leota's journal if ghosts within the portraits had not shown me the way. While Alistair Crump may have bribed or bullied these spirits into submission, it seems that many of them chafe at his rule and are all too happy to betray him when his back is turned.
So this section is going to be shorter than most of the land sections because it's a house.
Yeah.
So we have this mansion. It's formerly Gracie Mansion, is like the formal name, or Gracie Manor. People call it, the locals call it the Haunted Mansion. It is a pocket domain in that it's a house and the grounds around it. It has this history of deaths, of violence, of tragedy. I love, if you're a listener, you know, I love the, like, thing that's in all domains, kind of like House of Lament in Ravenloft, that this is sort of like, this can manifest in a bunch of different domains.
Yeah, the floating pocket domain.
Yeah. I don't think we necessarily want that here, because it is the idea of the history is so important that you need to be able to kind of do the research and, like, go to the, you know, town hall and read the archives and get the architectural blueprints and all that.
Especially if you want the full 2023 movie Haunted Mansion experience of the, like, you leave during the day, you do the research, you go over to Crump's house, which is different from the Haunted Mansion, and if that's the case, then, you know, Crump Manor has to be, like, in the same geographic zone as the Haunted Mansion. You can't, like, you know, be in Mordant with the Haunted Mansion and bop over to Darkon. So
the great thing is, though, you can put this in any domain.
Yes.
Like, any domain can have Gracie Manor, Crump Manor can have this Haunted Mansion.
Yes. When we get to the incorporating the older material section, then we'll talk about kind of which domains work better than others.
Also, on that topic, you can make it more self-contained if you tweak the backstory to be that this was Crump Manor.
Yes.
That he was the original owner. He died. Gracie bought it. So all in the movie, they go to Crump Manor to find, like, the backstory and find his head and find his hat and all that. That can all be in this. Even, like, the backstory stuff could be, like, in the archives, in the library.
Yeah.
You can keep the whole adventure just in this one house.
Yeah, it's like the, you know, getting the portrait and finding out who he is. Like, if it's his house, then there can be a portrait of him there. So you can be like, oh, that guy!
Now I've seen him in the ethereal plane. I recognize this portrait. I recognize that hat.
So, and if you wanted to do that, then you could have it be one of those floating pocket domains that can pop up anywhere.
Or if you have it, this be Crump Manor, it could even be the whole, once we figured out the ghost of Alistair Crump, he's actually buried outside.
Yeah.
So we could go, like, get the hat from his grave. Just dig up his grave and get a personal item.
Yeah. Or, you know, again, if you wanted to do the, like, that Gracie has collected some of the stuff from his occult collection, then, you know, you can go down there and get that.
Lots of options.
Lots of options.
So we have got, not much here at the rooms, we've got that the ghosts show up at night, but they get really strong at midnight. That's when it gets like you don't want to go around the house alone if you can avoid it, or indeed go around the house much at all. It's very dangerous. As we're getting closer to the full moon, the idea of the ghosts are going to be more powerful in the day. We have, like, the breakfast scene where everything's going crazy, and that's not a normal thing. They've been in the mansion a while, but they haven't had that happen because it's that sort of everything's getting more powerful as you get close to the full moon. Which, once again, love that as a ticking clock. We have got with the Escher hallway in the ride, this idea of, like, this is not a place where the rules of space and time necessarily normally apply, especially after midnight. Yeah. That you can get stuck in an infinite hallway. You can get stuck in a crazy MC Escher stairs folding in around themselves infinite stairway. You can, go up the stairs and find yourself in the basement. And, like, that's very useful for you as a DM because you can just get crazy with the with the exploring the house and what rooms they find and where they go and stuff like that.
If you want to have a rule for it, a fun thing to do might be like you label each of the, let's say there are 20 rooms. And if you label each of the rooms, and when they open a door, then you roll a d20, and that's the room that it leads to. And maybe you can even have like a little. Maybe this could be the chart that you put in the thing.
Yeah.
But like you can like roll out the room is sideways, the room stretches infinitely, the room is upside down, the room is like from a different point in time.
As Rachel mentioned, I am planning to put a chart in the write-up that is a bunch of rooms and a bunch of like random spooky things that could happen as they go through the mansion. I could also see something where when they're navigating the house after midnight, they have to make a save. And it's like, if they make the save, then the room is the next room.
Right.
Maybe like a wisdom save or an intelligence save or something. But if they fail, then it's like, no, suddenly it's this completely other room.
Yeah.
Or suddenly it's a stretching hallway. We have the library. We get that generally, they tell us in the movie, the ghosts leave it alone. This is kind of the library / stretching room. And the ghosts leave it alone, and that's kind of their home base. And I love this.
Yes.
So gameable.
Yes.
Because you've got this one zone in the house that they all like sleep in. So that's sort of, the PC slumber party, like, we're all staying in the, the 2 rooms at the inn, and we all have our bed. And,
Yeah.
like, it is just giving them that home base. They go and they do all their individual PC stuff during the day, but then at night they have to go back to the mansion, and that's kind of their home base, and they talk, and they share their things, and then they're all sort of in the library having whatever, like, PC roleplay scenes you want to have.
And then another thing that was taken from both the movie and the ride is the attic.
Yes.
Because the attic is where Constance Hatchaway is, and she's always the horrible malicious ghost. Because you get the whole story with her about how she was this, Black Widow decapitating her husbands and everything.
In the mansion, the ride, she is one of the ones that is the most, like, evil, obviously. Not just spooky. And one of the ones that, like, is meant to be a scare.
Yeah.
Like, you're supposed to be like, this, not just scary stuff is happening, but, like, no, this specific ghost is scaring you.
Yeah. And in the Muppets Haunted Mansion, she was, like one
the
of the big
villain.
villains. Yeah. So you could do a thing with, there's stuff that they need in the attic, just like there was in the movie. But in order to get it, they have to go up in the attic, and Constance is there.
Yep.
And especially if you want to, like, make sure that you're working in, like, a mid-boss fight.
Yes, she's a great mid-boss.
Yeah.
And then, finally, speaking of famous Haunted Mansion ghosts, we have Madame Leota, and we have the Seance Room. And Madame Leota, like both this and the Eddie Murphy, had a major sort of plot point, midpoint of the movie be finding Madame Leota. That's the one that, like, kind of gives you the backstory and who tells you what you need to do, basically. So you have to find her. That's, like, the first, like, big plot point is you find Madame Leota, and then she gives you the next plot point. And in the 2023 movie, it's specifically this, like, hidden seance room.
Yeah.
And once again, that gives you a great, like, first goal or task for your PCs as they try and unravel this is, okay, we need to find this seance room. We find these clues that there is a seance room, and we search the house, and we find the seance room, and then we find Madame Leota, who gives us the next step, who tells us there's this evil boss ghost, but there's a banishment ritual. I mean, even just, she has her powerful spell book, and can have the specific, like, ritual version of whatever they need to banish Crump. And that also excellently escalates. Like, Crump is going to be escalating his assaults on them when they find Madame Leota.
Yes.
Because she is the one that has the key to banishing him.
Yeah, so he does not want them to get to Madame Leota. He does not want them getting into the seance room.
So yeah, not much more than that. There will be.
It's a house.
There will be. I will give you in the DM's Guild write-up some other rooms, some other encounters, some other stuff that could happen. But that is the basic, like, most important, significant rooms we could have in your Haunted Mansion Dungeon Crawl Haunted House adventure. But why do your PCs first set foot in that Haunted Mansion? What does that adventure look like? Rachel, what do you do with it?
Dread possibilities. As the days ground past in Gracie Manor, my companions became increasingly peevish. For my part, I thought at first that the isolation was playing tricks on my mind, although I now know that I have Crump to blame. I caught glimpses of a black cat leading me down hallways, or heard my niece's voice calling my name. Whenever I followed, I would invariably find myself standing at the edge of a balcony, or on a staircase that was twisting itself upside down. On one particularly memorable occasion, I found myself standing at a door overlooking a room that had stretched to triple its original height. Had I stepped into it, I shudder to think of the distance that I would have fallen. These almost perfunctory attempts on my life were nothing compared to the endless mind games leveraged against my companions, however. Eldritch Sight revealed a near-constant aura of enchantment about them both, which may have explained why Antonio nearly stabbed Harriet with a kitchen knife when she remarked on his pitch. Events came to a head one evening as I pored over Madame Leota's journal in the seance room. Harriet entered, her hands slick and red, holding what I believed to be a wire taken from the piano in the music room. She snarled at me that I had always taken Antonio's side in their arguments. In truth, I had avoided them both as much as possible, and lunged for me with the wire stretched taut between her hands. For a single moment, her silhouette seemed to change as she rushed toward me, her ridiculous costume hat becoming flame-colored curls, her front teeth protruding rat-like over her lower lip, her dress taking on a green tinge. The thought of using my spells of escape, spells I have deployed readily on so many occasions, never occurred to me, nor did halting her in her tracks with hypnotic pattern. I have fled from far more terrible foes than Harriet with gaseous form, to the point where casting it is almost a reflex by this point, yet the only thing I could think to do was to attack her before she could reach me. I swear that I only intended to stun her with my Eldritch Blast. I swear it. But it struck all too true, and Harriet lay dead at my feet. I stared at her corpse in horror, then fled from the mansion, passing Antonio's bloodied remains on the way. No spirits followed me. Apparently, now that Alistair Crump had 999 souls, he was content to let me escape.
I want adventure in the great wide somewhere.
I want it more than I can tell.
So we have the PCs are locked in once they set foot in. Like Ben, like the characters in this incredible gameable movie, they are sort of stuck together as an adventuring party to solve this problem once they set foot in the house. But what brings them to this house?
Trade caravans?
Trade caravans. Delivery. They're delivery. The small-scale bespoke version of trade caravans that make a delivery.
Sadly, no trade caravans this episode.
So one of the obvious is to take stuff from the movie. And we got a bunch of different, takes on it.
Yeah.
And so starting with what most of our characters in the movie, that an NPC gets you or lures you or tricks you or convinces you to go in. This is the great thing, is once they step in the house, they're in.
Yes.
There's none of this, I'm just gonna wander off and open an inn or start a thieves guild. No, you're doing this dang
stuck.
story.
You're stuck. And the great thing, Tom pointed this out, because find yourself a man who. There was an unpublished Ravenloft adventure that had the phrase tugging purse strings versus tugging heartstrings. And that those are kind of the main ways to get to your PCs. Is that, are you going to say, hey, this is a thing that you can do that will really help these poor people, or hey, this is a thing that you could do when there is mad cash.
Right, or a thing you need. Like a physical, tangible reward you want.
And the great thing about the Haunted Mansion is we see both of those.
Yes, we do.
The purse strings and the heartstrings tangled in front of Ben.
We see, so you could have just, somebody bought the mansion, and now they're stuck there, and they're looking for help. And maybe it could be that they just reach out and hire the PCs. Maybe it could be they make contact with a kind of Ken-like, Father Ken-like figure who then reaches out to the PCs. Maybe it can be they trick them, they manipulate them into doing it. Maybe it can be they openly say, hey, you come in here, you're going to get haunted, but here's this fat stack of cash. Or maybe
amazing magic item.
Yeah, maybe it could even be something like with your Bruce-type character, where they're okay, we're in trouble, but don't come. And this might work for your group. Okay, we're in a lot of trouble, but stay out of it.
Yeah. Whatever you do,
don't come to this house. And they're like, the heck we won't. We'll show you who's in trouble. Oh no, now we're haunted. For something off the movie, You could have that Crump uses his illusions to lure them in, like he always wants people to come to the house. You get the idea that he's the one forcing the ghosts to haunt them when they leave. So once, like, he's banished... That's the great thing is, once you banish him, you're free. Mm-hmm. And that's even kind of the thing that drives them originally in the movie, is that whole, we are stuck in this house until we figure out how to deal with this guy, and then we're free.
Yeah.
And so maybe he's using illusions to lure them in. Maybe there's a terrible storm. You know, he's manipulating the weather. Classic ghost story stuff. Yeah, there's a terrible storm, and they see a light in the house in the distance.
They hear the voice of someone they care about inside the house calling for help. Or, you know, just catch a glimpse of something in one of the windows. Because, again, all they need to do is step inside to investigate, and they're gone.
Finally, for more of a proactive PC thing, you could have be there looking for a specific, like, magic book or occult object. Mm-hmm. They're like, we need Madame Leota's Book of Incantations. What is the thing we need it for in, you know, Darkon or whatever? Or this specific haunted music box that we trace the provenance, and it was last, you know, bought by William Gracie in this house. So we go to Gracie Manor and maybe discover there's people living in there for us to befriend, with, you know, cherubic little children for us to befriend, or maybe we just are the only set of PCs and we go into the house and do the whole thing ourselves. Either way, set foot in the house, they're in, you don't have to do any work to keep them on the rails. It's built into the structure. It's such a gameable movie.
So gameable. They've got a party.
So, speaking of gameable movie, this is basically the plot of the movie. And you've, even just with the Haunted Mansion, the ride, you've got some great ghosts, you've got some great encounters, you've got some great random spooky stuff to happen.
Yeah, you get like a setting and NPCs. It's great. It's great.
But the story here that the movie gives us is the plot of the movie. That they come in, they're stuck in, they're trying to figure out how to banish what's going on, how to banish these ghosts, how to free themselves from this curse. And meanwhile, Crump is either targeting the PCs or the NPCs. And the great thing is he can pivot.
Like the Dream Team.
One thing he shows us in the movies, he can pivot. And all of this is escalating toward the full moon. That's our ticking clock, that's our climax, is during the full moon. That the first step, they study the ghost, they learn about the house, they find Leota, they find the seance room, and that gives them the banishment spell. But to do the spell, you need the target. So then it's like, okay, we need to research who this boss ghost is. Mm-hmm. We know there is a boss ghost, but we need to figure out who the boss ghost is. And once again, brilliantly, like in the movie, when they find Leota, that's going to make Crump escalate. So that's going to get them in touch with him. So, this guy who's bugging us now, he's the one who we need to banish. Mm-hmm. And they do their research, they get the backstory, they look for the personal effect. That's so good.
It's so good.
And then you have that climactic confrontation, and you do the banishment spell, you fight Crump, you fight his minions, while you're either your NPC or Madame Leota's ghost or your spellcaster or cleric PC does the banishment spell.
Yeah.
And then you can leave the house. And as we mentioned, you could even simplify things by having Crump be the original owner. So all of that research and searching for the personal effect can be in this house.
Yeah. And that way, again, you can do kind of the more traditional closing of the borders. And just have everything be a lot more self-contained.
Next, let's talk about variations. And we always have the core variations we do. Aging down, aging up. Doing that for younger players, older players. But this one, as we mentioned, we have a bunch of other variations to talk about. Because it isn't a movie. This is a ride that got iterated.
A ride with multiple variations on the ride and 2 movies.
3 if you count the Muppets.
3 if you count the Muppets.
So first we'll start with our aging down. Once again, there's the content thing. If you want to include the suicide, if you want to include him tricking people into killing themselves, that is tricky to do with younger players.
Yes.
That what you'd want to do is kind of what we have with Travis and Ben, where it's the kind of tricking them into walking into the light.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's not like he is having Travis or Ben go and jump off a cliff. It's like there's this glowing circle where Travis is hearing his father's voice from telling him to come there.
Yeah.
And as opposed to where we see Gracie, we see he drank poison. Yeah. And you don't want that
or heaven forfend my way out.
Yeah. So grief, having it be the grief is a powerful and profound thing, and it's part of why it's a really good movie. It's a really good theme that ties into ghost stories very well. but it might be kind of either too heavy or over the heads of some younger players.
It's a thing that, like, unless you're playing with your own kids, you don't know. You know, maybe one of them, they're still, you know, their granddad died 2 years ago, but they're still singing from it. You know, so it is not something that I would ever do with someone not my own children.
So we play into these themes of grief at the loss of a loved one and like wanting to not be alive anymore.
Yeah.
But the great thing is you have anger. And that can be the real thing, is you take all the stuff the movie did with grief and you flip it to be anger. Because it's much easier for kids to understand. It's much easier to keep that at kind of a safe, you know, narrative distance, that this ghost makes people angry and he's trying to get them to fight and kill each other.
Yeah.
Like, they get that, and you can have this bad boss ghost. You can even cut Gracie if you wanted to cut that element, and just have it be that he's this bad boss ghost. And he died, and he's haunting the house, and he's trying to get a bunch of people to get angry and kill each other so that he can get all this, like, magic ghost power.
Yeah. Like, that could especially be a fun thing to do, honestly, with, like, tween and teen players.
Yeah.
Because you have GM'd some seriously murder hobo tween and teen groups. And kind of doing that as, like, almost like a deconstruction, like turning it around at them. Like, if they're old enough to be murder hobos, then they're old enough to enjoy that kind of, like, spinning it around on them.
And this also the ride does this very well, and the movie a lot of the ghosts they're kind of spooky, but most of them aren't very sinister.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are helpful, and they're flippable or helpful. You know, they get Gracie to help them. You have the paintings help Ben hide from Crump. And you have some of the ones that are full-on villain ghosts, and I like the movie does this. They're scarier, but they're also really goofy.
Yes.
So you have Constance. The scene with Travis's room at the beginning is one of, like, the scarier scenes, classic kind of horror movie scenes in the movie. But then she's like, ah!
Yeah.
Like, or the scarier ghosts also get their, like, goofy, lighter moments. So that's a good kind of baseline for, I have some spooky imagery, I have some sinister ghosts, but we're not going to get too heavy or too scary.
Yeah.
What about aging up to players whose deepest negative of the Haunted Mansion the ride is in a Halloween Haunted Horror Nights, like full bore nightmare fuel haunted house.
Yeah, so this is one where we're definitely going to be doing a content warning, skip ahead thing, just because we're going to be talking more frankly about these themes of suicide here than we have been before, because aging up is where you get to play those up. Future Rachel's going to be coming in with a content warning about that and anything else, and how far you need to skip ahead now. Hello, dear listeners. Yeah, we're going to be talking in more detail about how Crump would drive people to suicide or to murder-suicide, kind of thing that if you've read The Shining or if you've watched Mike Flanagan shows, you've seen this in action, you're going to want to skip ahead about 3 minutes to about 1:05:40. So, as we've alluded to a couple times here, aging up for this is really going to be The Shining. Like, Hell House also, but yeah, if you've read Hell House, awesome, but sales numbers tell us that more people should read The Shining.
Like, when Rachel said that, I bet you were like, oh man, I can totally see the line from 2023 Haunted Mansion story to The Shining.
Yes.
To the Overlook.
Because, like, we even had that Alistair Crump was having these, like, wild, decadent infernalist parties. And that's a big thing in Hell House, is the specifically doing these infernalist parties. But even in The Shining, you could have it be, you know, you had Horace Derwent throwing these, you know, big parties at the Overlook, and you could have it be that he was deliberately trying to channel or summon something there. And have that be Alistair Crump, and you have yourself an amazing Dark Lord.
Bored, decadent aristocrats.
Yes.
Slide into infernalism very easily, and like that's a very like easy to swallow. Like nobody questions it. Then was like, wait, then they started summoning demons. I don't think no. Like that. There's a logic there too. You're a bored decadent aristocrat, and so you start messing around with infernalism.
So you could have it be, if you want the Haunted Mansion to be less goofy, more scary, that a lot of the ghosts there are kind of these cultists, these infernalists from the party, these awful people who Alistair Crump kind of brought into his circle and corrupted, and they really wanted to be corrupted. They were like, corrupt me, and he corrupted them, and then he killed them. And now they're just awful. Again, The Shining. Think of all those guys at the masked ball in The Shining. And then, you know, we mentioned the playing up anger thing as a possibility for aging down. But you could even do that as an aging up thing if it's more, The Shining.
Yeah.
Where if you're doing kind of like the Jack Torrance, and this might even be the way that he's getting his willing soul, is if he's trying to get into someone's head and play on their anger and get them to murder all these people that they care about and then pull out. And let them see what they did. That's gonna get him a willing soul real fast. And, you know, again, I kind of like getting into The Shining, but also into sort of like more kind of the Mike Flanagan mode. You can do some of that with illusion magic. You can do some really horrible messing with people, getting them to do awful things or making them think they did awful things and getting them to become a willing sacrifice afterwards with illusion magic. You know, you can have the whole, like, having them see this person that they care about, and Crump uses his illusion magic to make them think that it's the big bad of the campaign. And so they go after them and attack them.
Classic.
Like, his plan is to get them to kill them and then, you know, kill themselves. Or, like, doing all these little illusionary things to just play on all of that anger and that grief, and you could just eat that up with a spoon if you're taking the brakes off for aging up.
So there are normal alternates we always offer, the aging up, the aging down, but sometimes we have more alternates to offer full-on AUs, full-on variant versions of the domain. And this one that's particularly present because we have a source material that has been iterated many, many times.
Yeah.
Like more than almost anything we've done. We have all these different iterations. And it's not like a public domain story like Snow White, where it's like, yeah, I guess there's been a bunch of Snow White versions. These are all Disney's Haunted Mansion iterations.
Yeah, because it's like with stuff like Snow White or Peter Pan, it's like, yeah, I guess we can bring in the AU stuff that from like different adaptations, but they're not really Disney. These are all Disney.
So, the first of those is bringing in some stuff from Phantom Manor, which is the, I believe, Euro Disney version.
Yeah.
And that was kind of interesting. It's much more Old West. They kind of build it in to gel with some of the story of, like, Frontierland. It's supposed to be sort of this Old West mining town mansion, as opposed to, like, your New Orleans Square mansion.
It's this whole, like, and as I'm sure our European listeners are aware, because I grew up in Germany, as we mentioned in the Snow White episode, and I know it's a big thing over in Europe of, like, we're so fascinated by the knights and the castles and the medieval stuff because we don't have that. And in Europe, they're super into the cowboys in the Old West because they don't have that.
Huge thing. Like, I feel like there are probably more Western-themed, like, tourist attractions in Germany than they are in, like, Texas.
I have definitely been to more German Western-themed tourist attractions.
So in Phantom Manor, the stories that we have this sort of boss ghost, the titular Phantom, who has a manor, and that he had this daughter, and she had suitors. They're sort of bringing in some of the kind of bride with 5 dead husbands. But in this case, it was 5 dead fiancés, and he murdered.
Oh, that is what they were doing.
Yeah, he murdered all of them. They're all haunting the house. And then we've got this, the bride, the daughter, she's heartbroken, she's haunting the house, and he's the very sinister, the Phantom's the very sinister, evil, murderous ghost that's haunting the house. So this is kind of interesting. It could be that you need to put them to rest, you have a mystery, a core mystery, like we said, that's what you really need here. Like if Walt Disney had just built Phantom Manor in California in 1960, whatever, we wouldn't need to wait for a movie. Like, it could just be you figure out and you reveal to the daughter that her father killed her fiancés.
That could actually even, like, because I didn't realize they were doing the Constance Hatchaway thing, sort of, but that could be a fun red herring for your PC. Yeah. They're going to think that she's the one who killed them all if they know that this is a Haunted Mansion game.
Ooh, that's a good one. And you can see, if you're a Haunted Mansion fan, you've probably seen the Eddie Murphy movie, and you can kind of see, like, oh, that's, like, kind of what they do with Ramsley the Butler in that Haunted Mansion movie, a.k.a. Terrence Stamp, a.k.a. the best part of that movie.
Yeah.
Best part of that movie.
Because, the Eddie Murphy movie, it was like... It's kind of a fun, like, thing to throw at your PCs if they're, if they've played Curse of Strahd and they know the whole Strahd Tatiana thing. Because Eddie Murphy's wife just coincidentally happens to look like Gracie's dead beloved, and he thinks that she's the reincarnation of his beloved.
And now they can finally be married and kind of break the curse that way.
But she's not. Yes. She's just some random lady. So you actually could do something kind of fun with, like, one of your PCs just happens to look like Gracie's, like, dead loved one, and, like, no, she's not a Tatiana reincarnation. She just happens to be a redhead.
When the Haunted Mansion came up in our Discord, somebody, I don't remember who, sorry.
Robin.
Said the whole, it's kind of great because you've got, like, Temu Strahd. You've got, like, for our older listeners, that's the you ordered Strahd on Wish. So, but, like, the great twist is, no, it's not. Like, he's not reincarnation. This is just some redhead that, like, Rodden convinced him was the reincarnation to, like, maybe it'll work this time.
Ron's just trying to, like keep him happy.
Yeah, keep him busy. Just keep him busy.
He gets just in a depressive spiral.
Yeah, right.
Cheer him up a bit.
Whenever the next Tatiana comes along.
I kind of love that.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, you could do that.
Rodden is like, Haunted Mansion 2003, Terrence Stamp as Ramsley is the best part of the movie. Now I'm thinking you could do worse than have Rodden be Ramsley.
Terrence Stamp from Haunted Mansion. Like, I'm really glad the 2023 movie came along. It is a much better movie, and it gives us a lot more to work with, and, like, that's a better boss fight.
Yes.
But if all we had was the Eddie Murphy movie, we could get this.
Yeah.
We could get this domain with Ramsley as the actual Dark Lord. I like to think it would be kind of an interesting domain. So that is an option, especially maybe if they know the 2023 movie more than the Eddie Murphy one, which is likely. And this would be a fun twist to throw at them. Then I know some of you are like, movie schmovie.
Give me the ride, baby.
Yeah, I
have the ghost host's whole speech memorized.
I just want to do the ride. I just want to do the ride because the ride is all I need. The ride is great. So now there's a bunch of words here that are Ravenloft words that I'm gonna. But we talked about some possibilities for if you just wanna do the stuff that's only in the ride and not bring either movie in.
Yes.
Ravenloft words, Rachel.
I apologize. We were outlining and trying to figure out a way to make it work, and I just kind of started free associating, and our outline is just my worst at it. But basically, we were watching some of the stuff with sort of the genesis for the ride, and the idea for it being kind of like a fun and not so scary sort of thing, like, because that was an issue that they were having with earlier versions of the story behind the ride, was they were all a little too grim. You had, like, Captain Gore being Bluebeard.
Yeah,
it was just, it was going to be too scary for the 6-year-olds. So what they ended up doing with it being the grim grinning ghosts and the, socializing and having a wee of a time in the mansion was this idea that it's like a retirement home for ghosts. And, like, especially this was, like, when the freeways were being built and everything. And so the backstory is sort of like the freeways have knocked down all these old historic houses. And so they've come to the Haunted Mansion to be like this retirement home for ghosts.
That's a fantastic elevator pitch, right?
Yes.
You could elevator pitch a lot with retirement home for ghosts.
And so we were thinking that, like, kind of the version of this in Ravenloft, that would be this big thing that's displacing all these ghosts, and they have to come and kind of, like, flock to this new place and hide there, would be, whether you're using old Darkon or new Darkon, it's going to be in Darkon.
Full service podcast.
Because old Darkon, there was this big thing called the Requiem, and there was the Illaluk turned into Necropolis, and all this, like, it got, if you were undead, then you were under the control of the Dark Lord, and it was just real bad news, so a whole bunch of ghosts might have wanted to just get out of there and go into Darkon proper. All of the ghosts that had lived in Illaluk, they've been displaced, and now they've got their retirement home for ghosts on the outskirts of Illaluk. Or New Darkon, obviously, the magical energy is ripping it apart, like this gray mist nonsense is devouring all of these haunted houses, and so the ghosts are flocking to this haunted mansion.
Yeah.
So you could keep kind of that, like, silly, lighthearted retirement home for ghosts element if you wanted to, and still have it be in Ravenloft.
The core thing I think you need here is more of a reason to get in there, because once you're in there, once again, the ride gives you everything you need in terms of encounters in terms of descriptions. And all I think you need is that there is some thing in there that the PCs need.
Yeah.
Some haunted object or book or something. And kind of, I don't believe the original Haunted Mansion has anything specific about being like this collection of haunted stuff. It does mention the library has first edition ghost stories, so sure, there you go. But kind of bringing in a little wolf from the Shanghai Disney with this collection of arcane stuff. And that's, you kind of just need the reason you're going in and the goal. Because right now it's like, well, why would you go in that house? But if you just have the PCs have a specific goal, a specific object they need that gets them in the house, that gives them a goal, and they just have to get the object and get out.
Oh, you actually could. Once again, if you're doing this whole setting it in Darkon, having it be the retirement home for ghosts thing, it could be that there was something that they needed that either was in a house that was destroyed in New Darkon and the ghost took it with them, or it was in Illaluk, which is now cut off and off limits because of the Requiem in Old Darkon. And either way, the ghost took it with them and they can get it now from the Haunted Mansion.
And then if you're running this pure Haunted Mansion, I think there's an obvious, and this is kind of a thing they do with the Muppets Haunted Mansion movie, Constance makes the logical boss fight.
Yeah.
We've touched on this. She is one of the ghosts that is kind of, you get the most story. It's not like, I guess she's an opera singer who died. It's like, no, she was a whole Black Widow, hatchet, chopping off heads. You get the whole combat encounter, and she's the one that seems malevolent toward the people in the rat. She comes at you with the hatchet and the beating heart. And so that is a really obvious kind of boss fight ghost. You have to go to the attic to get whatever it is you need, and you have to fight Constance Hatchaway and maybe the Hatbox Ghost.
Yeah, and you even could do a full Muppets Haunted Mansion where, Constance casts charm on one of your PCs and wants to marry them. And, you think it's going to be this whole putting the ghost to rest because they're her lost love, but no, she's just awful.
Yep. You could just do Haunted. If you wanted Muppets Haunted Mansion, you came here wondering we're going to mention that. You did, and check. That they get scattered around the mansion, they have to make their way through all the craziness and Escher hallways and get to the attic before the PC or NPC gets to be Constance's sixth husband.
Yes.
Or it can be the idea that the house itself is kind of come alive. I know this is drawing on kind of that Haunting of Hill House thing that they brought into Ravenloft. They do have the idea that a house or a building or whatever can kind of come alive itself. Or the Overlook. The Overlook isn't haunted by this old rich dude.
Yeah.
It's no, the place is alive. The place has a kind of malevolence. There's a big word for that, right? In the
Phantasmagoria.
Phantasmagoria. What a great word.
I know, right?
So you can, and honestly this is very in the spirit of the ride.
Yeah.
You don't want to commit to a specific boss ghost. You can have it be, the house. The mansion is the boss ghost. The mansion is a phantasmagoria. And you had a really cool idea for how this could kind of go down.
Yeah, because the big thing that we see in the ride for kind of the source of the power of the ghosts is actually Madame Leota, calling them forth, doing the seance. And that could be a really cool plot twist, again, to throw at kind of your Haunted Mansion savvy players. Because if Madame Leota, summoning the ghost is the thing that's waking up the house, then it makes sense that the thing that will, give your PCs a breather and let them escape, and maybe the win condition would be smashing the crystal ball.
Yes! Isn't that cool?
And in every adaptation, you mentioned there were some comics where this isn't the case, but in all of the movies, Madame Leota is this very benevolent figure who's helping them. So having it be no, actually, she is kind of the Danny Torrance of the Overlook, whose psychic powers that the Haunted Mansion is using to animate all of this stuff, and smashing the crystal ball is the only way to stop it. That could be fun.
I read it was the comics, and I read the summary. I haven't read the comics, but I was reading the summaries, and it was a while ago. But it's something like Gracie and Leota was sort of the, fortune teller, and he had an affair with her and had the illegitimate daughter that was little Leota. And she was in love with him, but he was going to marry, a proper, socially prestigious bride, and so Leota actually murdered her. And so you could have that kind of story and have that be the big reveal that Leota is actually the boss. Then you get a super cool, like, crystal ball floating with all these floating objects attacking the PCs, and they have to smash the crystal ball. And that's a cool, like, boss fight set piece, if nothing else. And as we mentioned, we are not the first ones to realize what a great dungeon this makes. There is on DM's Guild this adventure, this mod called Grim Grinning Gauntlet, that is kind of doing it as a pure dungeon dive. And we'll link to that in the show notes. So, we've talked about a number of possible iterations, including, and if you had this on your bingo card, lucky you, the Muppets Haunted Mansion. And let's wrap up our discussion of this incredibly cool Halloween session kind of adventure and give you our parting thoughts in a section we like to call
Parting Thoughts.
So the first thing I want to talk about in the parting thoughts section is the genre of horror. And Rachel, I was working on the write-up, and I did this part already.
I love you so much. I mean, obviously it's body horror.
Body horror,
Clearly.
yes. So you see the part where Ben gets possessed and gets all, like, squiggy-faced. Yes. So the genres of horror in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, it gives you a list of these genres of horror and then discusses how to use those genres of horror to guide the story you're making, and it's super useful, and talks about, with each domain, what genre of horror that domain is really evoking. So we'd like to do the same thing here, and on the write-up, which I'm not planning to change, I forgot we hadn't done this part of the podcast. I'm serious, I forgot we hadn't done it already. Ghost story, gothic horror.
Yeah, maybe not even the gothic horror, honestly. It is such a ghost story.
Gothic horror, mainly because you have Crump as the sort of corrupt or tempter figure.
Oh, yeah, okay,
yeah. The gothic villain.
Yep, okay, yeah, you're right. You're 100%
like,
right.
that's the big thing. If the classic Haunted Mansion, and indeed all the other iterations, including the ones with Miss Piggy or Eddie Murphy, are pure ghost story.
Eddie Murphy might also be the gothic, because there's kind of that gothic romance.
Yeah. But this, because the Crump, the Hatbox Ghost, is this really well done gothic villain.
You are, yes.
That totally. He is the moral, like his ugliness is his horror is reflection of his moral horror, and even that he's a tempter, he's a corrupter, and he's not trying to physically endanger Ben, he is trying to corrupt him.
There's even some good old-fashioned turning of the Screw-style child endangerment.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah,
there you go.
I did not think there were going to be any surprises in the genre of the horror section. I was wrong.
I knew there wasn't, because I already wrote them, and I'm not planning to change them. So, boy, that was easy. But yes, it's a Haunted Mansion. It's an Haunted Mansion. It tells you ghost story, and it tells you gothic horror.
Yes.
That's like the iconic setting of a gothic horror, is a Haunted Mansion. So then we like to talk about what kind of game this domain is best suited for. And some domains like Barovia with Curse of Strahd, like Darkon, which we talked about, you could do years of play. You could do a full hardback Wizard of the Coast, level 1 to 10, months and months and months and months and months and months of play campaign.
Throwing in side adventures that aren't even in the book.
Yep, adding all the stuff in. Others are focused on one specific adventure. Like, the domain really exists to tell this one story. I just watched Ravenloft YouTuber PhD&D, and he just did a thing about Markovia, which is the Island of Dr. Moreau campaign. And that's one thing. Like, that's not a level 1 to 10 Curse of Strahd style campaign in Markovia. Markovia is made to tell this one specific story. And both of them are great. And both of them are important to have a healthy Ravenloft ecosystem.
Yes.
And I would say this is pretty clearly a one-shot. This is a movie.
Absolutely, yeah.
I forget what episode, but a good rule of thumb we came up with was, if you could do a TV show set in that domain, it's your more Curse of Strahd, like, multiple months level 1 to 10 campaign. If it's really just a movie, it's like a one-shot.
Yeah, I remember in Pirates, another one we came up with was if you could have a bunch of adventures there that don't involve the Dark Lord.
Yeah.
And you can't have adventures here that don't involve Crump.
No, you do not. Yeah. And it's this one house, it's this one story, it's the PCs get in, they get haunted, they have to find out how to not be haunted anymore. They find out the backstory about Gracie, they find the seance room, they meet Leota, they get the banishment spell, they have to learn who the Hatbox Ghost is, and find a personal effect of the Hatbox Ghost, and they have to do all that before the full moon.
Yeah.
So, that's a great ghost story.
It is.
It's a fantastic Halloween one-shot. Want something to run in October, there you go.
It was a great movie. It'll be a great adventure.
But what we see here is to do the movie, and a movie is a one-shot. Then we like to talk in parting. Well, they're just blowing through this one now.
Right?
Now we're not about to. Oh boy, buckle up, folks. Buckle up, folks. It's gonna be a long time before our next script subsection.
I hope you like the sound of my voice.
Yeah, right. So, then we like to talk about how to incorporate the older material, the 2nd edition, 3rd edition, unified setting material, if that's a game you're running. Rachel, is there any older Ravenloft material that is relevant to our discussion of a haunted mansion?
Boy, howdy, yes.
I'm just gonna be quiet now.
I love you. So in this section, we talk about both if you're running the older stuff, how to put this in there, and also how to bring some of that older lore and those older mechanics into your 5e game, because a lot of them, even if you're running pure 5e, then you could port some of this stuff over and put it in there. So, we just mentioned our Pirates episode, one of the old 5e things was a Wereshark Pirate. And you know what? It doesn't matter what edition you're running, you can have a Wereshark Pirate.
Yes, you can.
So, I'm going to talk about some of the mechanical stuff first, and this is some of the mechanics that existed in 3rd edition specifically. Some of them were introduced in 2nd edition, but 3rd edition's my baby, so sorry 2nd edition people. I've run a lot more 3rd edition than 2nd edition. But I'm going to try and, translate it into 5e also, because some of these are just really cool mechanical effects that you can still use. And those mechanics are Ethereal Resonance and Sinkholes of Evil. So, Ethereal Resonance is the idea that the more ghost energy a place has, the more easily ghosts can see and interact with that place. Kind of that, your average non-haunted place isn't even there on the ethereal plane. Ghosts go right by it. They're not going to be interacting with it at all. And there's nothing there for them. And that's kind of why they leave you alone. Whereas if it's super haunted, if it's like Hill House or the Overlook or the Haunted Mansion, then it looks exactly the same in the ethereal plane as it does in the material plane / demi-plane of dread. That, the ghosts are going through this gray nothing, and suddenly up ahead, there's this solid house with all the lights on beckoning them. And that kind of is the in-universe mechanical explanation for how all those seances were drawing all those ghosts. That the more seances Leota did, the more the ethereal resonance was going up and up and up and up and up and up and up. And a fun mechanical thing with that is that because it's completely real to the ghosts, they can interact with the objects. So that's the whole, why you can have ghosts there. They're even though they're incorporeal, they're picking things up and moving them. They can open and close doors. That's kind of the explanation for how they do those classic ghostly manifestations. And this could also be a fun thing to do to your PCs if they cast etherealness or something like that. That a place with high ethereal resonance like the Haunted Mansion, because it is so solid and real on the ethereal plane, if a PC casts etherealness, it's still going to be real to them on the ethereal plane. So, they'll be able to see ghosts, but they're not going to be able to walk through walls because the walls are still going to be there. And, that was actually kind of their in-universe explanation for why sometimes you'll get a house where, the doors are opening and closing on their own, because why did ghosts need to open and close doors? And it's well, no, if it's the Haunted Mansion, the doors are still there for them. They're opening and closing doors. And the really powerful ones like Crump don't have to do that. There was a whole system for it that I don't need to get into.
Was.
Oh, yeah, there was.
3rd edition today.
But the weaker ghosts, that's why they'd be opening the doors and the windows, is because they had to. They couldn't go through them.
Why hinges would creak in doorless chambers.
Exactly. And also, that even plays into, when they were having the seance and trying to do the astral projection. Yeah. They were it actually seemed more real there than, in the physical world, and the ethereal resonance could be a fun way to do that. And then the other thing, if a place has enough ethereal resonance, it can also turn into a sinkhole of evil.
What an ominous name.
It is as fun as it sounds. I believe we mentioned this in passing in the Hunchback of Notre Dame episode.
Yes.
We're going to get into more detail now.
If you've been on the edge of your seat since last February.
I know we had a comment in the YouTube that's man, I wish we still had Sinkholes of Evil.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, you're going to hear about Sinkholes of Evil again from us soon.
With Sinkholes of Evil, if there is ethereal resonance in a place where something evil happened, then it has further mechanical effects, because boy howdy, 3rd edition loved its mechanical effects.
Sure did.
And this is kind of what we were talking about in that Hunchback episode, of the idea that, like, the Palace of Justice is extra evil, and especially, like, Frollo's room where the Hellfire song happened is extra evil. Because kind of all of those negative emotions kind of gather into place and taint it and affect the way it looks in the ethereal plane. So if you use true sight or etherealness or whatever, it's going to echo whatever that resonant emotion is. It could be, there could be one that's like an agony thing from a torture chamber that's, everywhere you look, they're kind of like screaming faces in the wallpaper, and all the edges look really sharp, and things look vaguely like implements of torture, even if there's something totally innocent. The Haunted Mansion, they had stuff for a grief sinkhole, which absolutely works.
Yeah, that's what we're doing here.
Just like everything looks dead, all the colors are dull and washed out, just you can hear the moaning and sobbing. Like, it all looks like some kind of awful, rotting, like, Wuthering Heights awfulness, even if it isn't. Or then you could also do stuff with rage, and in the rage sinkhole, it's, there's lots of red, things are on fire, there's boiling water and steam, it's hot, you have leering faces peering at you from behind the curtains, just all the edges look sharper, and so, those could be some fun details to throw in if your PCs kind of look at it with true sight or with ethereal vision or whatever. As some of the mechanics that they had for that, they had to be that you took a penalty to certain saves. It's 5e, so we're going to do disadvantage. You have a disadvantage on charisma or wisdom saves against emotions that match the sinkhole, which works beautifully with Crump's power.
It all, fits.
Yeah.
It all comes together.
So if there's a spell that's trying to make you feel grief or anger, then you get disadvantage on your save against it. Undead get advantage on saves against being turned, because Sinkhole of Evil, especially Sinkhole of Evil full of ghosts. And then there was a sidebar. There was a sidebar in the Sinkholes of Evil section that was actually titled All Work and No Play.
Yeah!
Because they knew exactly what they were doing.
That's what we're doing here, guys.
And in that sidebar, there was an optional rule that was, if you spend 24 cumulative hours in a sinkhole, then you make a wisdom save, and if you fail, you get a temporary madness. And then we mentioned Phantasmagoria. That's what happens when a rank 5 Sinkhole of Evil comes to life. That's kind of the next step, is you go from rank 4 to rank 5. You can't go from rank 5 to rank 6. Instead, the rank 5 Sinkhole of Evil just kind of comes to life, and now it's the Overlook or Hill House or whatever, and it has a mind of its own.
Do you want overlooks? That's how you get overlooks.
That's how you get overlooks. So, again, if you want the mansion itself to be the boss, if you just want to do straight the ride and none of the ghosts speak to you as the Dark Lord, you can do that.
So now that we've talked about some of those mechanics you can import, like the mechanics, it's a lot of words and a lot of numbers.
Yeah, sorry.
But they do a good job trying to systematize ghost stories and ghost story logic. And because of that, there's so much overlap with the Haunted Mansion story, because it's trying to follow a lot of your classic ghost story logic. Like, everything the movie's doing is trying to be something that makes sense in a ghost story.
Yeah, like, I'm sorry, I know that was a lot of words, but one of the things that I really loved with older Ravenloft, say what you will about 2E3, they were big on the mechanics, and they used all these mechanics to give you these tools to emulate these kinds of stories. And that's, an area where something more rules light like 5e, on the one hand, that lets you fudge it and do things with flavor more. But if you want to mechanically reflect it, then it's a little lacking in that area. So if you want to bring in those mechanics, then 2e, 3e is your baby.
But it's not only the mechanics of the older editions of Ravenloft and of D&D that we can bring in and connect to this Haunted Mansion setting. There's also a number of specific, places and details of that older version of Ravenloft that we can bring into the setting.
Yes.
Back to you.
So we mentioned that it makes the most sense for the Haunted Mansion to be set in a specific domain rather than just floating around. And, of course, if you've ever listened to this podcast before, we have thoughts on where that setting should be. And honestly, It seems like because it's a ghost story, the obvious setting would be Mordant, but in the outline it says not Mordant. This is the only place where I'm saying do not set it here. Like, you can put it in Tempest if you want, but don't put it in Mordant. Because the thing with Mordant is Godfrey wouldn't stand for it. Alistair Crump is stealing his thunder.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. In both versions, Godfrey's trying to gather up all the ghosts and bring them into his house. It's a horrible sinkhole full of 999 not-so-happy haunts. And that's what Crump is doing. And there's going to be a showdown between these two if he's in Mordant, which, if you want to do the showdown, that could be fun. But otherwise...
But it's like if we were like, how to do Dracula as a Ravenloft domain. And we were like, don't set it in Barovia, because why would you do that? Like, I remember while we were watching this stuff with Crump and Haunted Mansion, and they got to like, what's the ghost that ghosts are afraid of? And I was like, is this a Ravenloft?
Yeah.
Like, is this a Mordant reference? Is it that kind of nerd?
Yeah. It's actually, I was very tempted to skip ahead and do more Mordant stuff, but no, I need to stay on track.
Yes.
This is going to be confusing.
There's so many words.
Yes. Put a pin in Mordant. We'll get back to it. I promise. Put a pin in Ghosts the Ghosts are afraid of.
For the people that just clicked on this for Haunted Mansion, who are still with us, Mordant is designed to be the Wuthering Heights Gothic haunted mansions domain.
Yes.
Like, it's the English moors full of these rotting old noble mansions full of ghosts. And the domain lord actually is a ghost who terrifies other ghosts.
And makes them all come and haunt his mansion to increase his power.
So that's why we're like, no, there's no point doing that.
Now, for places to actually set it, Old Sarania is perfect because the original Haunted Mansion in Disneyland was set in like the New Orleans Square, and both Haunted Mansion movies are set in Louisiana. So New Sarania, it's one of those domains that only gets a paragraph right up in the book. It's very vague. But Old Sarania, it was the Haunted Bayou. So that is where I would put the Haunted Mansion. I put it in Old Sarania. If you want to do the aging up version, that's kind of more the decadent, like, Overlook or Hell House.
Yeah, more of your Richard Matheson's Hell House.
Yeah. Borca's always great for decadence. Borca does have the House of Lament, though, so that might be too much overlap. Honestly, old school Nova Vasa would be pretty great for it, too, because that's the Jekyll and Hyde domain. So this could be kind of where the people went and let their hair down and really went nuts.
Yeah, this is the Hyde zone.
Yeah. So, all right, okay. I can go off on the tangent that I wanted to go on as soon as you said Ghosts the Ghosts are afraid of. So those are the places to set it. And then for kind of the fluff material to bring in, as opposed to like the crunchy mechanic stuff from the older material, the way that they mechanized Godfrey being the ghost that other ghosts are afraid of in 3rd edition was, they had the whole, in both 3rd and 5th, the whole that he's bullying and intimidating the ghosts. He takes the ghosts who are beloved by people who are still alive and, like, holds them for ransom and blackmails their loved ones into doing things for them. And the way that they did it in 3rd edition was actually that he had this magic cane that would charisma drain you if he beat you with it. And ghosts in 3rd edition were powered by charisma. So you don't have to have that specific mechanic, but that means that it does work really well if Crump has something like that the ghosts that are fighting back against him, the good ghosts, they're going to be a lot weaker, and all they're going to be able to do is whisper from the portrait, the pointing and showing you the way out, like the helpful ghosts were in the Haunted Mansion movie. Whereas your ghosts like Constance Hatchaway, you're kind of your more vicious ghosts who are going to be his lieutenants because it gives them an excuse to go and cause violence. He's going to be letting them go at almost their full power. So that could be just like a good like background thing that doesn't necessarily come up to the PCs at all, but in your head that he's doing whatever way he's hurting the ghosts is also depowering them. Tom is looking at me
with great love, dear listener. With great love. Just this doesn't need to be a thing that ever comes up, but in your head that this is how it works in the rules.
I do that so much, dear listeners. I have to know what the rules are. I have to know. Otherwise it's chaos. There has to be a rules reason, or why am I even here? I had mentioned the original House of Lament in 2nd edition, and they were really straight up doing Hill House, and that didn't work as a domain because a Phantasmagoria doesn't make a Dark Lord.
As we talked at the top of the hour, we talked about why we're glad there's a movie.
Yeah. But the thing that they had for the House of Lament in 2nd edition was this kind of, it was whatever walks there walks alone. It was, doing the straight up Hill House. But there was, like, this specific ghost. It was, Mara was the woman who had been walled up in the house. She wasn't, like, an evil warlord. She was just some poor lady who got walled up in the house. So it was kind of like her loneliness was sort of powering the house, and so somebody had to die. If you went into the house, then somebody had to die before anyone could leave, and it could be, the willing sacrifice, or it just could be murder. So that could be like kind of an alternate, if your PCs don't want to do the whole banishment thing, you could have it be like the PCs and some enemies are in there, and once somebody dies, and that kind of like temporarily resets things and they can get out. And then the last thing that's in here, and I can just mention it and not bore you with a whole bunch of stuff, is that we've mentioned the Bleak House adventure before, mostly in the context of the first part and like the Crazy Insane Asylum and how that worked really well for Holes. But then part 3 of Bleak House was this extremely gonzo haunted house, and there was some stuff in there that could be really useful to mine for inspiration for the Haunted Mansion and all, like, the hauntings going into the different rooms, because it had the big map of the house, and for every room it had the minor haunting and the major haunting.
Yeah.
So the kind of you go in and just something mildly spooky happens versus the, like, you go in and all of the mounted animal heads on the wall in the trophy room suddenly come to life and attack you.
Start screaming, "Ancient!"
Yes. And that could be a useful place to go for inspiration if you want to have, like, a whole mapped out house with a gazillion rooms, because, like, the Haunted Mansion ride, it gives you the attic, it gives you the ballroom, it doesn't give you a haunted kitchen. Bleak House gives you a haunted kitchen, it gives you a haunted wine cellar, it gives you a haunted everything. So,
and that's just great to have in your pocket.
Yeah,
if your PCs, as they so often do, go off the track. They get out of the people mover, they get out of the, like...
the doom buggy,
and wander off to the kitchen.
So, okay, I am finally done.
And
I'm sorry. Living
you.
extremely haunted houses in Ravenloft.
There's a lot. Because the idea of the Haunted Mansion is such an iconic horror setting, there's a lot that Ravenloft has done with it. So the last thing, after an exhaustive overview of connections to previous material...
I admire you if you're still here, dear listeners.
Good job. Join our Discord. So, we like to talk about is the strengths and challenges of running a game in this domain. Strengths, it's great. The Haunted Mansion is a beloved, iconic experience for a lot of people. This is the great thing is, this might be useful to you if your players aren't necessarily horror fans, but they're just like Disney adults. And you want to do something for Halloween.
Yeah.
Because this is one of those tons of people that don't like horror love the Haunted Mansion and are going to love that experience of going through the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah.
It is iconic. It is a lot of the work is done for you in terms of here's some cool ghosts, here's some cool set pieces. Once again, you can go to the attic. You can have a bride with a beating heart attack you with an axe. You can go to the ballroom and have this crazy ghost dance going on. You can go to the cemetery and there's a mummy.
Yeah.
There is some, bringing in the movie, there is fantastic potential for role-playing with this theme of grief. That if you have a PC that loves role-playing, if you have a PC that loves role-playing, there's a good chance they have tragedy in their backstory. And they can be the Ben. And there's like such a great chance to give them that wonderful role-playing of being the Ben, of struggling with and ultimately, hopefully, overcoming their grief.
Like, I know in our game, I know exactly how I would target both you and Chris in the Haunted Mansion, and you would both be eating it up with a spoon.
And just, we've mentioned this again and again and again, the movie is so gameable. It is such a good D&D game. You even have a party. Like, I was watching the movie going, oh my gosh, this is like a role-playing game.
Yeah.
This is, you have a group of weirdos who get drawn together by fate with a common goal, and they each have their specialty in overcoming this, like, haunted house obstacle.
Yeah.
And any, like, occult, more modern-y occult game. You could do Call of Cthulhu, you could do World of Darkness, you could do like Dresden Files, you could have
this exact
party, right? You could have spoiler alert, the con artist pretending to be a priest, the scientist, the medium, the historian, and they all have their specialty, and they all play that critical step in solving the adventure.
Yeah.
So it's so gameable already, so it's easy to gameable. And the fact is there's a lot, as we've mentioned, of potential tones. You could lean in a much goofier Grim Grinning Ghost Come Out to Socialize, or to full on, this is, you know, a sort of top-hatted Victorian version of The Shining.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to recommend. What about some challenges?
Session 0 it.
That's in all caps. It wasn't clear from her voice.
Yes. This is another one, you know, like with Encanto and Hunchback that I mentioned at the top of the hour, that just to get into the subject matter is going to be potentially triggering. And so just, you gotta know your players, you gotta know what they're comfortable with. Yeah, Session 0 it.
If you want to have those scenes with, like, Ben and Harriet talking about loss, talking about death, talking about, you know, searching for meaning, searching for a sense of the presence of the people we love and have lost. That could be a real kick in the teeth for if it comes out of nowhere for certain players.
Yeah. The story, like, it's not just that it's a one-shot, it's that it's a one-shot that has, like, kind of specific steps along the way. So it has the potential to feel railroady if you're not handling it deftly, like, especially with the ghosts literally herding you back into the house.
Yeah.
Like, there are going to be some players who are really bridle at this.
Who are like, all they're gonna do is try to figure out how to not go to the house.
Yes.
And your whole game is trying to have them roll stuff as like, well, what about if I do this? What about if I do this? What about 4 hours of not going to the house.
Congratulations, this is your campaign now.
Yes.
Every week they meet to brainstorm ways
how to not go to the house. So, like, have a group that's gonna roll with it.
Yeah.
That's gonna be like, okay, this is the story. I accept that this is the story, and I will go to the house.
Yeah. Crump isn't one of the more compelling Dark Lords we've done. Like, we've already done some work on making him, like, a richer and more nuanced character, but you might need to do even more. Like, if your PCs really like delving into kind of the backstory and the motivation, you might need to put more there. There's less there than with some of our other guys. And then, this is more for our Disney heads out there. Our Disney adults. I don't know if Disney heads is.
I don't believe so. It's not a term I've run into.
This is for our Disney adults out there, and this is a problem that honestly all of the Haunted Mansion movies have run into.
Yes.
Which is how much to make it a Haunted Mansion story versus your own story. Like, if you're going to be throwing in a bunch of cameos, a bunch of Easter eggs, a bunch of cute Haunted Mansion references, throwing in Captain Gore because you know that he was in the original version of the Haunted Mansion, and aren't your players going to love it? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. If they're not Disney adults, they're not going to know what you're doing. So just know how cute you can get. Know your own potential for being self-indulgent. Just, make sure that you're using the Haunted Mansion in service of the story and not the other way around. But yeah, there's a lot. It's
a really good haunted house, and that makes it a really good D&D Halloween adventure. And the 2023 movie did most of the work of giving you a plot for that haunted house.
Yeah.
So if you want to get in touch with us and tell us which of these variants you decided to do, then how can they do that?
Well, you can email us at wonderfulworldofdarklords@gmail.com, and you can find us on Facebook, Tumblr, or Patreon at Wonderful World of Dark Lords. And ever since Kraken Week, our YouTube channel has
Yeah.
gotten a lot more active. We've been seeing a lot more comments there. So if I don't know what our exact...
Wonderful World of Dark Lords.
Just look
Yeah.
for Wonderful World of Dark Lords on
The
YouTube.
left's his hand holding an apple.
Yep,
That's us.
Yep, you know us.
If you search for Wonderful World of Dark Lords on YouTube, you'll find our stuff.
Yep.
And if you like how we have copied the homework of the 2023 Haunted Mansion, but how we've considered all these different variant Haunted Mansion stories and adapted them into D&D adventures. I have a couple of other adventures adapting movies, mostly horror movies, some more Disney movies like Toy Story or Tron, mostly horror movies on DM's Guild. If you follow the link in the show notes to the write-up and just search for more by this author, search for Tom Kohler on DM's Guild, you'll find my stuff. And if you like our consideration for younger players that are maybe not ready to learn about my way out, then or deal with talking about grief, then we also have some things about running spookier, more horror-themed games for younger players.
And then speaking of spooky things for younger people, I have a picture book. Mother Ghost, Nursery Rhymes for Little Monsters. It's 13 classic nursery rhymes written to be about Halloween, and if you order it now, then you can still get it in time for Halloween. You can also go to my website, www.rachelkohler.com, where you can find a lot of my published short stories for free. And then a real quick note, when our narrator talks about where she's going next, we had said in a previous episode that this coming one was going to be a bonus episode in addition to one of our fall episodes. We ended up having a lot of bonus episodes in a fall. We only have time to edit so many episodes. So if you're like, wait a minute, they said this wasn't going to be a regular episode. That's why.
Also, as I said, we are gonna maybe the idea of Sinkholes of Evil is gonna come up again in the near future. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that.
Mm-hmm. And there's a certain day that we normally have episodes drop that's not the 13th.
Speaking of bonus episodes in fall, until next time, which might be sooner than you think. Thank you for listening, and happy gaming.
Parting thoughts. Gracie Manor is an insidious trap for any who are unfortunate enough to find themselves within it. Those who enter this cursed mansion must keep their wits about them at all times, for Crump will eagerly seize on any vulnerability he senses in his victims. I had thought myself immune to his beguilement, so obvious were his attempts to lure me to my death. It never occurred to me that he was lulling me, ensuring that I would not suspect him of pivoting to a different approach. My time in the manor was draining, and although my next destination is a place where some find rest and refreshment, I have doubts as to whether they will open their doors for me. Bearing a piece of coal as a mist talisman, I reminded myself not to eat any food unless it was offered to me, and to guard my name with care, for a human has no place in a bathhouse for spirits. Regards, D.
My little servant may recall her education in Sinkholes of Evil from our correspondence after she visited Notre Dame. I strongly suspect that Gracie Manor shares a singular commonality with the Palace of Justice. They're both sinkholes. Such a place only serves to enhance the abilities of a spirit as powerful as Crump, perhaps even granting him control over the spirits trapped within the manor grounds. Naturally, as my servant witnessed, Crump does not hold complete control over them, but just enough to constantly steer him toward his ultimate goal of escape, a tune I am all too familiar with. There are rare, invaluable, and highly coveted rituals designed to ascend one to a higher level of existence and obtain power commensurable to the gods themselves. Such rituals take lifetimes of dedication and research. Crump may have knowledge of one and plans to empower his own ascension, the collection and sacrifice of 1,000 souls. Ascension may allow one to escape these realms, though if what lurks beyond the obsidian gate of the Shadow Rift is to be believed, then perhaps even the gods are doomed to the eternal torment of these lands. The key to ascension is often tied to great sacrifice, and I theorize that Crump needs something more profound than simply another death in order to complete his own. My intrepid little scholar would not likely provide what he requires, and she was released in hopes of luring an easier prey. For there may be grief and hatred in your heart, my dear servant, but Crump no doubt found your stubborn, defiant nature too difficult to manipulate into fulfilling the required role of final victim.
This has been The Wonderful World of Dark Lords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Azalin Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at Dark Lord Azalin. The Wonderful World of Dark Lords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening.
What is a Dark Lord?
Well, a Dark Lord is an evil being who commits some kind of act of ultimate ultimate narkness.
Nobody loves this next to snitch.
Snitches get Dark Lord
Snitches get existential stitch, the ethereal stitches.
Well.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just gonna do this, okay?
So the rest I'm gonna be thinking about acts of ultimate narkness.
Yep, I know.
Well, good news is we have a stinger right out.
Yeah, right.
Well, a Dark Lord is an evil being who commits some...
Do I need to leave the room?
No, because I'm not looking at you.
Good.
It's just, I start to get to the word darkness.
Okay, how about this?
Okay.
This is my plan.
All right.
To just say the word ultimate darkness, and I can cut around it.
All right. Some kind of act of ultimate darkness. Well, a Dark Lord is an evil being who commits some kind of act of ultimate darkness. I said it.
Yeah!
Yay!